Back with chapter 26 from Modern American History. This will actually be our last chapter that will formally cover, like we have the past ones, with the notes, guided reading, and a little quick write on the Google Forms, which hopefully has been pretty easy. And then an assessment at the end. Probably the last week, I'll have you do something very small for the last week of school. And then that'll be it. So we're kind of getting down to it. Feel free to email me feedback or leave me comments in Google Classroom if you've liked the assessments. I've only heard positive things so far, so if you want something different, let me know. But I'm trying to just kind of keep this procedure like we've been doing, and hopefully it's not too much for you as we move forward and everyone's doing well. I haven't had anyone come into my office hours at all, but if you'd like to, you can. This week, I believe, will be I'll have it on Google Classroom. I gotta take a look and see exactly how I'm setting up my other classes. But feel free to pop in if you want, if you have questions or anything. But you don't have to, of course. So let's talk about chapter 26, and we're going to talk about Bill Clinton today as we kind of wrapped up with the Persian Gulf War. We're going to start into the election of 1992. So George H.W. Bush was president, had success, the Persian Gulf War, but his popularity is going to decline pretty heavily domestically of what he's doing in the country. And the big gaffe that history kind of remembers from him is when he was running for president. One of the big questions posed to him was, would he ever raise taxes? Because Ronald Reagan, if you remember from the notes, had kind of the Reaganomics plan, cut taxes back, and eventually he had to raise taxes. People were not happy about that. So George H.W. Bush, who ran on, hey, I'm Ronald Reagan Part 2, I was his vice president, he got asked, hey, you going to raise taxes? And he said flat out, quote, read my lips, no new taxes. And one of the first things he did in office was raise taxes. So going against that campaign promise so bluntly did not make people very happy. So even though, Persian Gulf War went well, he really didn't get the credit. Norman Schwarzkopf, as I talked about last week, 2 weeks ago, got most of the credit for that. So he's has a problem. And the Democrats really didn't have a great candidate to put up when this was kind of an incumbent that they could beat. And the guy that kind of emerges was a dark horse Arkansas governor, Bill Clinton. He was young, he was attractive, he was very personable. He was someone that people kind of gravitated towards and felt like, hey, this is a guy, I could have a beer with and I could sit down with and we could have a conversation. He really catered to young people. He would play the saxophone on the Arsenio Hall show, which was kind of a late night TV show at the time. And people are like, oh, the president, President Kid's playing the saxophone. This isn't, some uppity classical whatever. He's playing jazz. Like this is new. This is different. And the other thing I would kind of think George H.W. Bush was a third party candidate who would run in 1992 and 1996. His name was Ross Perot. He was a self-made kind of businessman, oil tycoon. He used his own money to fund his campaign, and he was a business guy. It was almost kind of a modern day Donald Trump kind of deal where he was running and saying, hey, I know business, fix this economy, make things right. And what he would do, he would buy TV time late at night. If you ever woken up at like 2 a.m. or maybe you stayed up too late and it's 3 in the morning and you turn on the TV and there's all these weird infomercials for products or whatever. That's what Ross Perot, he bought that time slot. He bought hours on TV and just that was his campaign, just talked about himself, and so Saturday Night Live made fun of him a lot. He had kind of big ears and a bigger nose and talked with a kind of weird accent, southern draw, with a kind of very unique guy. So, he got a lot of conservatives to vote for him as a wealthy business guy, and that took votes away from George H.W. Bush. So Clinton's going to win, and Clinton wins in kind of a different way from the FDR Democrats of the past. Bill Clinton is going to win by kind of promising things that aren't very left-wing. He's going to promise to help business. He's going to promise to move away from the liberalism that Reagan had challenged. So, in essence, he's kind of moving the Democrats back toward the center, and that's going to be one of the big things. So, some of his kind of policies we'll get into. Hillary Clinton, his wife, who ran for president in 2016, lost, became state senator in New York, became Secretary of State. She's going to take on a huge role as First Lady. And something we didn't get into too much before we kind of left was most First Ladies have kind of a thing. They kind of have one topic that they focus on. Usually it's not super important, but something that can create some change. So, for example, Nancy Reagan, her thing was she kind of did like the anti-drug stuff. You had, Barbara Bush, hers was libraries. She was a librarian, wanted to open libraries. Michelle Obama was something maybe familiar to many of you, right, with childhood obesity and school lunches. So that's that's kind of the side of that. Melania Trump is cyberbullying and going against that. So, but Hillary Clinton, as First Lady, she's going to take on healthcare, and that's like a really big issue. That's a big problem, something we still debate very heavily today in politics. So, this isn't libraries, this isn't opening libraries. This is, trying to correct the healthcare problem, trillions of dollars industry in America. And so, she kind of fought for this reform. She went in front of Congress. She had this plan, but Congress was dominated by Republicans in the House and the Senate. Both were majority Republicans. So they really shut down her plans quickly, but she gained kind of prominence to have her own political career after the fact. Bill Clinton, his thing was cutting budgets. Once again, not a very democratic thing. Today, that's mostly a Republican ideal of cutting spending, but that's what he wanted to do. And they kind of went at it in a unique way. And his way was working a little bit with Republicans in Congress to cut just unnecessary pieces of the budget, cut small things, little things that no one really knows about that are kind of in the budget. Maybe it's a pork barrel, it's called. Sometimes if congressmen and senators pass a bill, they want something for their home state, or they want, some money to go to their home state, so they kind of slip it in the bill, and I'll vote yes if you add this, and maybe it costs, $100,000. It's a tiny amount in our total budget. So, but they start cutting these things. One that I remember clearly from the time was, I think it was something like $500,000 a year was being spent to study the effects of wine on people. I think we know what the effects of wine are on people. Okay, so let's cut that. We don't need that anymore. So these little pieces you cut, it kind of adds up to cutting billions. The economy, goes way up. And the federal government's actually going to take a surplus of money in for the first time in 30 years. So what that means is the government actually takes in more money in taxes than they spend. That has not happened since. So President Obama, President Trump, George W. Bush, none of them actually has ever had a surplus. Democratic Congresses, Republican Congresses, none of them's had a surplus. So Bill Clinton, Republican Congress, first ones to have surplus. And the other thing that was cut and kind of limited was the welfare system of how much money you could make on unemployment if you didn't have a job. So things that we don't associate with Democrats were things that Bill Clinton was doing. Foreign affairs were kind of interesting. So I think there's definitely some positives, definitely some negatives. Something if we would be in class, I'd get more into. But Bill Clinton kind of took a moderate approach, just like he did with politics in the country, took a moderate approach with foreign affairs. He's not going to go the Jimmy Carter route of if a country has human rights violations, we're not going to deal with them, not going to trade with them, not going to help them. Now, we'll trade with China. We'll trade with Russia. They are committing human rights violations, but we're going to criticize them publicly. We're going to kind of be on the attack on them, not actually send troops or anything. But we'll trade with them, but we'll let them know we don't agree with what you do. So kind of a middle approach. We're going to talk hard, but we'll still make sure we do things that benefit us. One of the big foreign affairs issues that Bill Clinton had success was in Bosnia. So when the Soviet Union broke up, a lot of the old Soviet republics kind of broke up and had some problems converting to their own piece. One of these was Yugoslavia, and Yugoslavia is going to kind of break apart itself and create these different countries. And so in Bosnia, you had Bosnians who were kind of a certain ethnic group. And next to that was Serbia, and the Serbian president Slobodan Milosevic, his goal was to kind of eliminate Bosnians and Kosovo and Albanians, and basically have Serbia be the only thing. He was trying to commit a genocide. He wanted to kill 2 races of people and wipe them out, and so Serbians would be on top. So we actually got involved as part of NATO. We negotiated a peace deal, put in peace troops over there. I believe we still have a very small amount over in Bosnia, and basically ousted him from power. So that was a success. There were plenty of foreign affairs failures, once again, that I would get into in normal course. If you've ever seen the movie Black Hawk Down, was a civil war we got involved in Africa, was a massive failure. So it's kind of positives and negatives. A lot of other type of genocides, that Rwanda was a genocide that was ongoing and we kind of stayed out for a long time. So some regretful things, some positive things in the foreign affairs category. Another piece of foreign affairs is trade, and Bill Clinton's going to pass one of the he's going to be a big proponent and sign one of the biggest trade deals in U.S. history, at least 20th century history, I would say, NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, something that's still in effect today. There's been some criticism of it from President Trump and others, but it's not been something that we've gotten rid of. So what this is basically Canada, Mexico, and the United States, we will have free trade. No tariffs, no taxes on goods coming in, right? So if a Canadian company ships in maple syrup, we're not going to put a tax on top of that. And so this way, what this does is allow for things like, Mexico is really a big one. Things like avocados, which are fairly expensive, tough to grow. And if we would put a tariff, we put a tax on it, that price would go up. That would be kind of bad for us. We don't really grow avocados very much in the United States, a little bit in California, but we can't supply the whole country with avocados, so we have to bring it in. We have to import it, and so that that's a benefit. And in the same sense, when we ship computer parts or things to Canada, our companies aren't getting taxed additionally. So it's kind of this free trade, generally looked at as pretty good. And the Speaker of the House at the time, his name was Newt Gingrich. He actually ran in a primary for president in 2016 against Donald Trump, and lost pretty badly. He in Bill Clinton's Bill Clinton's end of his first term into his second term is going to really challenge Bill Clinton, and he wants to cut taxes even more. And Bill Clinton's like, look, we cut spending. And Newt Gingrich want to cut taxes, cut spending, cut more. But say, hey, look, we cut all this stuff. The economy's great. We don't need to cut anymore. We have cut billions of dollars, and it worked. That's it. I'm drawing the line. I'll veto anything with more cuts. So they kind of had this standoff. And one of the things that the government has to do every year is approve a budget. The Congress has to approve a budget. How are we going to spend the money that we have? The president has to sign that budget. If they don't, you can't spend money. And the government gets shut down. And we've seen that happen multiple times here in the past 4 years. And it had one of the longest, we just had the longest ever. One of the longest ever occurred under Bill Clinton, where he would not agree to a budget that would cut more things and refused to negotiate. And Newt Gingrich and the Republicans in Congress refused to negotiate. The government was shut down for 27 days. And one of the big things in a shutdown is, who do the people kind of side with? And people sided with Bill Clinton. I mean, the economy's great. He's kind of gotten credit for a lot of this stuff. He's done well. We're going to trust him that we don't need to cut more things. Like, everything's good. What do we need to change? And so Republicans had a cave. Newt Gingrich ends up resigning, and they were hoping that it would really hurt Bill Clinton, and instead the Democrats are going to gain some seats in the House and Senate, and Bill Clinton is going to get reelected in 1996. So now, one of the things that was kind of ongoing through that first term and into his second term And kind of what Bill Clinton is remembered for is a lot of accusations of corruption and other issues. So there's a lot of different things back as governor of Arkansas. There's some business allegations where a lot of this kind of started. That as governor, he was giving contracts to friends of his that weren't doing work but getting paid. It's called the Whitewater scandal. It's a little more in depth than that, but one of the big ones was a sexual harassment case against Paula Jones. Paula Jones was an employee of Bill Clinton's in Arkansas when he was governor, and said that he sexually harassed her. And so he was basically had to give a deposition. He had to go and swear on the Bible under oath and give a deposition. They asked him a lot of questions, right? And one of the questions that they asked him was about kind of a rumor that he was having an affair with a White House intern named Monica Lewinsky. Nothing to really come of this, but he denied it. He said that he did not, and that was kind of the end of it. That was it. So Monica Lewinsky had worked in the White House as an intern. She ended up moving to the across the street to the old executive office building, and that was kind of the end of that. But a co-worker of Monica Lewinsky, her name was Linda Tripp, taped a conversation where Lewinsky admitted to having an affair with Bill Clinton while he was president. And a big part of it was the government shutdown, because when the government shut down, the only people that can work are people that don't get paid and people that are essential. And so she was an intern. She was working for free. So she was one of the people there and they had access to each other. So Linda Tripp ends up, telling the FBI, getting them involved, kind of getting Monica Lewinsky to meet her at a mall. And she ends up getting picked up by investigators that Congress had launched, and she ended up selling this tape, making a ton of money as well. So basically what the Clintons do is, a really interesting way to handle this kind of thing. He denied it initially, and they said, hey, come after us, send the best investigator, best lawyer, someone that hates us to really investigate. Now, pretty quickly after, Bill Clinton will admit, to doing that, right? The famous kind of "I did not have sexual relations with that woman" is what he said in the deposition, and then again to the American public. Pretty soon, the evidence is out there, and Monica Lewinsky will admit this to investigators so that she doesn't get in trouble for anything. So the guy that's hired, Kenneth Starr, is a lawyer. He's going to publish the Starr Report, and what the Starr Report basically said was, hey, Bill Clinton lied under oath, which is perjury, which is a crime, and by saying that he didn't have sexual relations with Monica Lewinsky, that he obstructed justice as the president, tried not to have this investigation go full out. Now, what Bill Clinton did legally to kind of get around this was say, well, the definition of sexual relations, or of sex, right, in the deposition was sexual intercourse. And he did not, he did not have sexual intercourse with her, which was true. So he can deny that, and even if other things happened, that was not the case. The smoking gun in this that really got Bill Clinton to admit, hey, this did happen, was that Monica Lewinsky actually had a dress that she had worn in one of their encounters that still had a semen stain on it. It was tested. It was positive. It was his. So, her mom had kept it in a closet for this type of occasion, and that was kind of it. So, as we've seen the impeachment process play out recently, the House of Representatives votes to impeach, and impeachment is not removal from office, right? So Bill Clinton will be impeached. The House will approve two bills by a majority: perjury, that he lied under oath, and obstruction of justice. So that is impeachment. We've now had 3 presidents in U.S. history be impeached. Andrew Johnson, after Abraham Lincoln, he was impeached, almost thrown out of office. Bill Clinton, and then most recently Donald Trump was impeached. Richard Nixon, member from Watergate, would have been impeached, would have been removed from office, but he resigned before that could happen. So 3, probably would have been 4, but that was the case. The Senate votes to remove from office they didn't come close. There wasn't a majority. He was not removed from office. That this lying under oath was not enough to remove him. So one of the crazy things during this whole process, his job approval actually rose up. It actually went higher because the economy was great. Unemployment way down. Everyone's pretty happy with the job that he's done as president. It's just kind of this moral failing. So pulls about his character would fall. And ultimately, it's not going to hurt him. He already won re-election. He can't run again. It's really not going to hurt him that much. The person that it hurts, I will get into next week, is his vice president, and that's Al Gore. We'll talk about what happens with that next week. So that's Bill Clinton's presidency in a nutshell. Obviously, the impeachment and the sex scandal was big. I mean, I grew up during that time, and I remember every tabloid, newspaper, TV station, I mean, it was 24/7 everywhere. This is the first big time that cable news really took off with this. But, in terms of economic achievement, he did really well. In terms of foreign affairs achievement, a little up and down, but generally pretty good. Generally a pretty good president for the time. Worked with Republicans. He was not super. A lot of people like to paint him as very liberal. He really wasn't very liberal. He's going to roll back Glass-Steagall, which was passed during the New Deal, things that many liberals today or Democrats today want back. So there you go. That's 26.1. Hopefully you had a good week. Do the guided reading. Hit those quick writes, just real quick in Google Forms. Shouldn't take you more than 5 minutes for that, and all will be well. So talk to you soon.